Attorney, and she's fighting for you guys. There needs to be a couple of ways you fight this battle. Number one is being here. They're hearing you right now in Lansing, and that makes a big difference. A lot of people sit home and type on their keyboard. Catherine's typing, and she's taking care of the law side of it. Let's give a warm welcome to Catherine. She's going to give you an update of what's happening legally. Let's round of applause. Let's give it. Come on, it's here in the rain out there.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a really crappy day like this. It says a lot that we're sticking together. Am I holding it too close? Okay. Many wonder why I'm coming here today. My friends, my family, my neighbors, they wonder why I'm here. Well, I'm here because I will not stand by idly while our governor, our attorney general, and several local prosecutors and law enforcement officers continually break the law.
I'm going to use your umbrella here for a second. Is that right? Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I am not here to advocate for civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is where you think that the law is one that shouldn't be enforced. I am advocating for civil obedience because the law is very clear. None of the governor's executive orders have any legal authority after April 30th.
That's right! That's right! Yeah!
Thus, I advocate for Michigan residents to exercise all of their rights, to open their businesses, go in public without a mask if they choose, participate in social functions without a social distancing requirement.
All right.
Go to birthday parties, funerals, AA meetings. I am advocating for people to have discussions with their local law enforcement, prosecuting attorneys, and public officials to encourage them to follow the laws written, allowing people to exercise all of their constitutional and statutory rights without interference. All of the governor's 2020 executive orders are based on her emergency powers. However, that state of emergency and state of disaster ended as a matter of law on April 30th. While there are lots of other legal provisions involved, the main point is that both the 1945 Emergency Powers of Governor Act and the 1976 Emergency Management Act must be read together. You can't cherry pick the laws here. So, as required by the state statutes and the Michigan Supreme Court, you have to read all the laws on the same subject together. And as required by MCL 30.403, legislative approval is needed in order to extend the governor's emergency orders.
That's right.
Yes! But they did not choose to extend the last time I was standing on these steps on April 30th. So therefore, all of her executive orders lost their legal authority on April 30th. By attempting to continue exercising these emergency powers after April 30th, Governor Whitmer is breaking the law, MCL 30.403, and violating our state constitutional provisions that restrain her exercise of authority. Specifically, if you look in our state constitution, Article 3, Section 2, it prohibits a governor from exercising authority properly given to one of the other legislative or judicial branches. So, in other words, she is not allowed to enact laws all on her own. And that's what she's trying to do now. The governor and the attorney general, Dana Nessel, have told us that the governor is allowed to just terminate one state of emergency and keep issuing a state of emergency as long as she wants to. That's not allowed under the law. There's nothing in the 1945 Act or the 1976 Act that allow her to do that. And as we all know, the governor or any government official cannot act without specifically being given authority to do so under our laws or under our Constitution. Many of these executive order provisions also clearly violate the rights guaranteed to us in both the Michigan and U.S. constitutions. MCL 30.421 requires executive orders and other emergency actions by the government to be done, quote, consistent with the provisions of the state constitution of 1963 and the federal constitution. Additionally, MCL 30.421 prohibits prosecutors from prosecuting any violations of these executive orders in any, quote, manner that violates any constitutional provision. Prosecutors are further prohibited by the First Amendment, further prohibited in the prosecution of these violations of executive orders from prosecuting, quote, conduct presumptively protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Says so right in our state law. This is not a carve-out for certain individual behaviors. This is a stern reminder to prosecutors on the restraints placed upon the government in trying to regulate us, the people. And that is even in the most heightened state of alert our state could ever experience. Attorney General Nessel claims legislator commentary created confusion among law enforcement officials tasked with enforcing these orders. And she claims that these orders are legal because they're so reasonable. But it is not reasonable to issue executive orders like they're going out of style, which last I looked yesterday was 80 executive orders in just over 2 months. And it's not reasonable to treat statutory emergencies like a mere term of art instead of the actual urgent situations these emergency powers were meant to address. It is not reasonable for a governor to exercise powers properly belonging to the legislature, especially for longer than the statute allows. It is not reasonable to interpret MCL 30.403 to allow a governor to circumvent the 28-day time limit by simply issuing new orders that address the same emergency conditions of the original order. And it is not reasonable to think that this particular governor gets to unilaterally extend the state of emergency or state of disaster when none of the 87 prior declarations were ever extended without the legislature. It is not reasonable for executive orders to be issued based on selective compliance with statutory provisions. It's not reasonable to assume that the legislature enacted the entire Emergency Management Act in 1976 for the sole purpose of just deferring to the so-called broad powers in the 1945 Act. It is not reasonable to issue emergency declarations and terminations like a light switch just being turned on and off. It is not reasonable to issue or enforce executive orders that infringe upon our constitutional rights, especially when those rights are explicitly preserved in the language of the Emergency Management Act itself. Nor is it reasonable to enforce executive orders explicitly focused on, quote, keeping people away from each other, end quote, when those same people are guaranteed the right to assemble, collectively worship, express their speech, and petition the government. All of the executive orders by Governor Whitmer in 2020 are based on her emergency powers. And with the emergency lawfully ending on April 30th, all of those emergency powers came to an immediate end. Without such emergency powers, all of her executive orders became unenforceable as a matter of law. This includes the stay-at-home order, the order restricting non-essential medical and dental services, the order releasing prisoners early, the order canceling the rest of school for the year, the order cutting off kids in juvenile detention centers from their family and support services, the order closing movie theaters and gyms, and limiting restaurants to takeout service only, the order amending the Open Meetings Act and FOIA, the order allowing only restricted access to government services or to places of public accommodation, and every other order that has been issued this year. All individuals are therefore now legally allowed to travel, assemble, worship, conduct business, go to places of public accommodation, and exercise all of their rights without any attempt by law enforcement, prosecuting attorneys, or places of public accommodation to infringe upon those rights. All attorneys, law enforcement officers, and public officials took an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Michigan Constitution, and to faithfully support the laws of the state of Michigan. Therefore, any such person who attempts to enforce these executive orders is directly violating their oath of office, acting outside of the scope of their governmental authority, and engaging in malicious prosecution and abuse of process. As I've shared with the prosecuting attorneys across the state this very information, a few have actually replied and said things like, well, this is only an opinion. These statements are threatening to me, and only a judge's opinion matters. Well, the very words of our statutes and in our U.S. and Michigan constitutions are not opinions. It's the law of the land. And this is only a threat to those attempting to violate our laws and our Constitution. And if you plan to do that, then you better consider this a threat to your profession, because we're going to come after your profession if you're going to break the law. You can wait for a court to sort it all out if you want, but I won't. I did not get my rights from a court. I got my rights from the Almighty God, and our U.S. Constitution was written to secure those blessings of liberty, as stated in our preamble to our U.S. Constitution. And here, quote, "We the people of the state of Michigan, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of freedom and earnestly desiring to secure these blessings undiminished to ourselves and our posterity, established our state constitution of 1963. These liberties are meant to be exercised by all people, unabridged and undiminished by the very words of those constitutions, during times of emergency or not. So I am going to follow the law, the Michigan Constitution, and the U.S. Constitution, and exercise my rights now without waiting for permission to do so. And I urge you to do the same." Thank you, guys.